utilized for their self-care, aren't necessarily compensated and paid well also. And so when you're deciding to engage by getting pedicures or getting massages or other type of body or energy work, also being mindful about the places that you're patronizing, that you're going to get those services in terms of how they treat their people. So while you're getting your self-care done, you're going to a place that actually maybe not the greatest to their staff. So a lot of people don't know them with like massage therapy, for example, you're getting charged. Some places in New York, it's not uncommon for it to be at least $100 or more for an hour, but people only get paid when they're doing sessions. So although they may be asked to be at work for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, a lot of places only pay their staff while they're in session. So if they're not booked the whole day, they're only getting booked when they're doing sessions. And then it's a percentage of that, and it's less than half most places. And a lot of people don't know that. And so one of the things that I realized I had to do for kind of my own self-care, sanity, and wellness was I was like, I need to start doing some of this work for myself, because working for spas, while there's a lot that I learned, some of the places that I work weren't the most healthy environment. So here I was helping people get pampered, and then I felt like I was in a really unhealthy workplace. And then because of my gender presentation and sometimes with the racial piece, I wasn't received. And a big thing is that people ask for what gender they want their practitioner to be. And then I would be the one to go greet a guest, and people would be like, oh, but I asked for a woman, or, oh, but I wanted this kind of person, and this person isn't meeting that. And that's how you would start off this, session. And I finally just was like, you know what? Like, I'm of color, I'm queer, I'm genderqueer. I'm going to start a practice that addresses all of those things. It's welcoming to everybody, but I want it to be a place that not only I feel comfortable working, but that people like me that may not always feel like other places are accessible are able to go to. And so that was part of my self-care journey too, was changing how I worked.
And we've talked actually about entrepreneurship as a form of self-care, because you can kind of, because you're changing rules and creating rules that work for yourself. And I think what you're talking about, though, in building a space where it's not just for you that you're getting the care, but where others also can come and feel comfortable receiving care. It's about kind of thinking about building communities of care. So something interesting that I've talked to people about recently is, hearing about parents who are like, I don't have time, I don't have alone time, but they'll meditate with their kids, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a thing you can do.
Yeah, you're like, hey, if I can't get alone, everybody in the house.
Everybody's doing it. We're all doing it together.
Go meditate.
Yep. And I think, that's something that not everyone considers, because people think, oh, this is supposed to be like an alone solo thing. But it's like, I wish someone had taught me to meditate when I was 5 years old. I feel like I would be a very different person. And so I think, a lot of these practices that we do solo, there is, of course, value in doing them solo, but there's not inherent value in doing them solo. Yeah. There are things that we can do together with each other. And I think even in drawing boundaries and thinking about communities of care, I thought the recent, I don't want to say incident, but the recent violence in Charlottesville created an interesting moment for me to realize, where I was like, as you were describing, not interested in engaging in conversation with white people who had realized that we have a racial justice problem in this country. But I did realize that as a non-Black person of color, I did need to speak up within my community and to say that, hate is hate, and that hatred is not discerning, and that, people of color who are not Black, like Black people, cannot solely bear the burden of carrying and speaking out against this type of hatred. And so I think, when you're talking about boundaries and communities, it's also about kind of deciding for yourself what your role is going to be in the space you're going to occupy, I think. So not speaking over people, but realizing that, and it changes, as you're saying, over time with various privileges, and also in the spaces that we're in, what's going on, whether we speak up more, we speak up less. But I think building those communities and those supportive communities, because part of it too is like the way you get half an hour alone is someone handles your responsibilities for those half an hour.
Yeah.
Or you have that half an hour in your day, which not most, but a lot of people don't. So, I was on vacation last week, and the way everything got done was I had someone who helped me. So it's, we talk about self-care, but it's often not just, it doesn't happen by yourself, which I think is also kind of the lie we tell about self-care, is as though you can do self-care alone.
No.
No one does self-care alone.
Nobody does. I mean, because a lot of the things, again, that one does for self-care, right, still involves another person often. So if it's you're going to go do yoga, if it's you're going to get a pedicure, it's like the person that's giving you the pedicure. That's part of how your self-care got done. And so recognizing that. But I think the community piece is huge. I mean, we know that, for a lot of things, and especially for behavior change and making something a habit, having community to build. And that's one of the things I think that can be really great about, social media, so there's so many meditation apps, for example, that are out now. And I think part of what helps people with some of those is, having a community, and you can join groups, and, you can have other people that you check in with. Or when I was at first like a Fitbit person, having a community and doing the weekly challenges was huge. And it would push me to be like, I guess the dog's going to go for another walk now. Like, I'd be like, all right, let's do this, is a huge piece. And as an entrepreneur, that's been huge. Just having, friends and people to check in with as I'm doing this process, because I'm just a little over the first year. And, it's been awesome, but it's a lot. There's a huge learning curve. And so I think the same thing is doing any other kind of practice or building, ritual. And then also I think hugely including into that for people is, whatever their spiritual or religious practices, and also realizing that there's a spiritual side to self-care. And, this could be a whole nother radio show in of itself, but a lot of times for people in the LGBTQ community, some of us have quite a bit of spiritual healing that we may need to do, and reconnecting either to the faith that we were raised with, or deciding what may fit better for us now for where we're at in our lives. And that's a huge piece of embracing the spiritual self-care and looking at what that looks like for oneself. Because for me personally, when I was coming out, there were some things that happened via religion that made me really afraid to decide to practice any kind of spiritual practices or go to church, because I had really been harmed in that process. And then now coming into that in myself and being like, well, what is it do I need, and how do I claim that space and either find safe space or make that space for myself and look at it from this way of divinity, and that divinity that's within myself, because I believe that everybody has that within themselves. And when we are able to be quiet and still and listen to our bodies and what it is that we need, we really can embrace what I think is kind of that true piece around self-care, which is about, nurturing and loving yourself. And it's going to look different, for each person. And so, for me, part of that was the business piece. And then through that, for me, I got all hippie with it and like really needed to connect with my roots. And I really drew on power and energy from my ancestry and from my grandmother. And so like I named my LLC after her, and then I named my practice Rooted Bodywork, because I just had like this imagery of trees and being grounded and being connected and really thinking about how we're all connected to each other. And that's where I got my strength, got that strength from, and what really helped me embrace that side of myself and build that up. Was huge too.
And I think what you're saying is powerful too, because what you're talking about, particularly in regard to religion, is that, if you're a person who grows up in a faith community, it would be, and that community ends up causing harm to in some way. It's kind of this weird space that you're left in, where it's like that's how you know to care for yourself. That's not how that's part of who you are, but it's also caused you pain. And so what I think it's interesting what you're talking about is that it's not necessarily about, well, you need to reject something. It's like you can acknowledge that, yes, faith is part of who I am, but I need to find a faith community or a space that's more, that's giving me what I need. Yeah. And so I think sometimes people are drawn to extremes, right? Particularly when it comes to religion and faith, which is that like, I'm an atheist, screw God, God is dead, etc. Or on the other hand, I need to change everything about who I am to fit into a community that is not accepting of me as I am. Yeah. Whereas what you're saying, I think makes to me more sense, which is kind of find a space that allows you, that gives you what you need, allows you to be who you are, and allows you to grow as you are instead of trying to change and fix you, which I think is so important, and I think is something that would have kept me in religion and believing in religion much longer. And I think frankly, if we had faith communities that looked more like that, we would probably have less of a craze around self-care, because we would be getting it from religious and faith-based communities.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's a piece, and part of why, I mean, yoga is a huge example of that, right? I think so many people are,